The insulin index shows that you can have certain things and not other things. And that the fast mimicking research shows there's long-term benefits that you don't lose if you have a few things.
Welcome back to the Kingdom Fasting Podcast. I'm Brianne Sims.
And I'm Dr. Sam Sims, nurse anesthesiologist.
And we are here today talking about fasting fuels. We've been talking about what is fasting and why should it matter to me. Hopefully it's begun to matter to you and you're willing to try. So now we're getting into some more of the fasting basics. And fasting fuels is one of those.
Yeah, how to make fasting practical and useful and sustainable, I guess would be a good way to so you can incorporate into your everyday life.
Yeah, and I see fasting fuels as making fasting more accessible for more people and just more doable, the idea of this. So where it really started was with the research on fast mimicking.
Yes. So this is all research and evidence-based. So fast mimicking is where you eat a certain amount of calories while you fast. Mm-hmm. It's very regimented. It's controlled. It's a program people pay for, so there's an expense to that. And they have shown that people who do fast mimicking, they'll increase their immune system. They'll lower their insulin resistance. They will decrease their liver fat and mortality and morbidity risk factors. So there is evidence that you can actually consume calories safely and still get benefits of fasting, but there have to be very specific calories and very specific foods. Now, so we can use that information. People who use fast mimicking, I know people who have gone through some programs where they have a very low caloric intake that they paid for. They can have certain foods throughout their week, but typically they say they're hungry for all 5 days, and that sounds miserable to me. That's one thing I don't like about them. But what I do know is there are actual benefits of fast mimicking, long-term health benefits. Yeah. So what we can utilize that is we can look at what were the foods that they consumed and how can we, knowing that we can consume certain foods and keep ourselves in the fasted state.
Right.
Right.
So it's about keeping your body in the fasted state and not breaking your fast. And by breaking your fast, we would say that is raising your insulin and your blood sugar.
Yeah.
Right?
Too high. Yeah.
Too high.
Too quickly. Yeah.
Too quickly so that you're not in ketosis any longer, which means basically you're not using fat as energy source any longer. So if you're still in ketosis, you're still using fat as energy, then we would say that you're still in the fasted state. You have not broken your fast.
Right.
Okay?
So certain things, so as long as we can keep our caloric intake very low, okay? And so what we're going to use fasting fuels is to help us keep fasting.
Right. It's a tool.
It's a tool. And it's not a rule you have to follow, but it's a tool. And so let's say I'm feeling a little hungry and I want to keep fasting and I want to see, is this hunger a hormone or is it actually I need to eat?
Right.
So I may have something that
if you're feeling a little bit hungry, the first thing you want to do is drink a bunch of water and see if you're just thirsty.
Yeah. But
okay. So that's usually the biggest thing when people are fasting is that you might just be thirsty. So always try that first.
We want to use foods which are low on what's called the insulin index. So foods that don't spike your insulin very much. So fat does not spike your insulin very much.
Right.
Okay? Protein doesn't spike it as much. Fat is the lowest.
Right.
So things that are high in fat and a little bit of protein can help you keep fasting. So you could have
very small amounts.
Very small amounts. You could have a couple of nuts. That would be a food you could eat. You could have some sparkling water that doesn't have any sweeteners.
Right.
Or you could have some tea. You could have some coffee. But you could add a little bit of a cream to your coffee.
Which is fat.
In
a small amount.
A small amount. And so what you want to do is I add to my coffee, I'll add a little bit of oat milk, but I make sure it's unsweetened oat milk.
Right.
So, and I measure it. That's the only time I measure stuff when I'm fasting. I make sure I measure it.
Fasting, don't want to break your fast. Don't want to spike your insulin or your glucose levels.
Right. So in this cup, I have some coffee with 45 calories of oat milk, okay? Right. Unsweet. Yeah. And it's lasted me now about 6 hours. I've just been sipping on it today. Now, typically my coffee is gone in the first 45 minutes.
But it hasn't broken your fast.
No, I consume it slowly.
And it hasn't the other key thing is that it hasn't made you hungry.
Hasn't made me hungry. So
we know that it hasn't spiked your insulin or
Right.
your glucose levels because it hasn't made you hungry.
Right. So certain fuels or fasting fuels will make you feel hungry on certain days. And so if you sip something or you taste something and it makes you feel more hungry, then that's not a good fasting fuel for you that day. So try something else. If your hunger goes away, then it's a hormone response. And there's this thing called the cephalic response. When you taste certain foods, your body's like, oh, it can make you more hungry. Mm-hmm. So if something makes me more...
Especially if it's sweet.
Especially if it's sweet or has a sweet flavor.
Yeah.
So that's why we avoid any sweeteners. Monk fruit, you can't have that when you're fasting. You can't have Zevias. You can't have any artificial sweeteners, non-natural sweeteners. Okay. But we're not so legalistic about it that you can't have like a little bit of sugar. What that means is like 1 or 2 grams that you would consume over like 20 to 30 minutes.
Right. So I know some people who, like, while they're fasting, they'll chew gum, and that helps them continue fasting. That would not work for me.
That's not a good fasting fuel for me either.
At all. That would make me hungry, tasting that sweet flavor. Some other people put a little bit of cream and a little bit of sugar in their coffee because they can't stand to drink it without, and they want to still have the caffeine and keep fasting and not have the caffeine headaches, the withdrawal, right? And some people do fine with that, and it doesn't make them hungry. I personally cannot drink coffee while I'm fasting because it spikes my insulin, and I have that... spike, and then I have the crash where I am so hungry and I experience low blood sugar and things like that. And so a caffeinated drink like coffee does not work for me while I'm fasting. And so it really just depends on your cephalic response, your hormones, how your body responds to different foods, because everyone is different. So my go-to fasting fuels would be like bone broth, which is also a great thing to break your fast with because it's mostly fat, a little bit of protein, and it soothes your gut. And I have had a lot of gut issues in the past, and so bone broth is a good one for me. I also like to just add salt to my water, mineral salt, sea salt, because it has minerals in it. And I also like to have sparkling waters. Other fasting fuels besides those are nuts, which are a good choice. Just a couple of them. As a general rule, we say below 50 calories or below that. I mean, 100 calories below that.
Yeah, I mean, with the fast mimicking, it's less than 500 calories a day, and what you want it to do is you don't want it to make you hungry. So you could have a few almonds, and maybe this hour, and then have a few almonds maybe the next hour. So you're trying to keep it under 500 calories a day. I don't like fast mimicking because I don't want to count calories.
Right.
I want to use them as tools to help me keep fasting.
Right.
But I do measure certain things. But I don't want to give above 700 calories in a day.
Right, because if you're sitting down and eating a cup full of nuts, you've broken your fast. Okay, that is not helping you keep fasting.
Well, it's fat, so I can eat a stick of butter.
not how it works. So,
no.
But if you eat like 2 or 3 macadamia nuts, you drink a bunch of water, and you feel like, oh, I'm not hungry, I'm fine, I can keep fasting. That is what these are for, to help you keep fasting. And for women, that is especially helpful. Certain times of the month, your hormones and everything, you are hungry. You are having more hormone hunger spikes than normal, okay, during those times. And so the fasting fuels can be really helpful if God's called you to fast, or you're fasting for a specific reason, fasting for your health, whatever it is. One of my other favorite things to use as a fasting fuel is a pickle or a couple of olives. There are a lot of options out there that are just fat, and you can have a small amount and continue to fast. And those are hugely helpful. Yeah,
vinegar decreases your basically your blood sugar, your insulin response. So you don't want to count calories with pickles because you'll have a response to filling your entire stomach full of pickles. You could eat a whole jar of pickles and it would be 5 calories. That's not what you need to do. Like, I'm still fasting. No, you're not trying to fill your stomach and make it full. Your body has to process that. So you would eat a little bit of a pickle. Maybe try the pickle juice.
Right. Sometimes it's just about tricking your brain into thinking that you've eaten and you're not hungry anymore.
Yeah.
So if you taste something, 1 pickle or whatever it is, drink a bunch of water and wait a few minutes and you're fine, then you're
fine.
It's working.
And so we did a longer fast, and on like day 10, we had a little fasting charcuterie.
Which was like 3 almonds with some mustard,
Yeah, and mustard has no calories, so that's kind of nice, and has no sweetener. So we had some yellow mustard, and we had some nuts, and we had capers are good because they don't have very many calories. So now, we did that on like day 10 of a 14-day fast.
Right.
And then we went right back to we after that. So we had less than 75 calories over a span of 2 hours that we spent time together. And you can't tell me that all of a sudden my body is not in the fasted state the next day. If I haven't eaten for 10 days and I ate that, and then I went another 3 days. So it's, or 4 days. So your body will go right back to it. And so what you can use is, this is one of the reasons why you can like have communion. It's such a small amount of calories that it's really not going to break your fast. Now, if you can pray about it and you feel like, I'm at church, I'm not supposed to have this. But for the most part, it's just a small amount. It's not going to break your fast. And if you're in the fastest state, your body's not going to be like, well, that's it. We're going to turn everything into fat and sugar now because we always
take communion while we're fasting.
Yeah,
it's never broken our fast.
Yeah, you've had 3 or 4 calories. I mean, I used to be very rigid about it when I first started fasting, and I was like, I didn't want to do anything, only water, no fasting fuels until I did some more research on it. And then one time I was up in front of church. I was on day 4 of my fast, of a 7-day fast, and I was up there, and I was passing the communion, and they had us up there at the front at that time, and we were supposed to take communion in front of everybody, with everyone. I can't just be like, I ain't doing that. You know what I mean? I mean, you guys are doing it, but, I'll pass it out to you, but, so, I guess if I felt, but I did it, and I was just fine. And so I kind of started realizing that some of my really rigid thinking that I had, was incorrect. For another example, I'll give you an example. Terry Crews, who's in really good shape, right? He sips, and he fasts every day, and he sips a little bit of amino acids in whatever liquid he has throughout the day. And so when I originally said, well, that's not fasting. But he's pretty ripped, so I think he's just fine. So when I realized that fast mimicking is, yes, you can have certain things. Now, what you can't have everything. You can't have you can't have 50 calories of jelly beans. That will spike your insulin through the roof. That will break your fast. That will make you hungry.
Yeah.
But you could have 50 calories of nuts, because fat's a different response. So the insulin index shows that you can have certain things and not other things.
Right.
And that the fast mimicking research shows there's long-term benefits that you don't lose if you have a few things, fasting fuels while you fast. Now, one caveat with fasting fuels is it's really easy to use them to cheat.
Yes.
And so I can have it, so I'm going to have it. And so eating olives when you actually don't need olives, because if I have less than 50 calories of olives, I can have them, so I'm going to have them, not because I need them.
Right.
And so, and I struggle with that too. When I did a longer fast, sometimes I would cheat and have a fasting fuel, and I'd feel bad about it because I didn't need it. They're tools to help you keep fasting, not tools to help you cheat on your fast. And
exactly.
And it's just to be aware of that. And so even when you have those, why am I having this? Do I need it to keep fasting, or am I just eating it just because I want to be able to have it? And I will say one of the easy ways to add, if you want something different than water, is you can add 1 tablespoon of pretty much any fruit juice to your water.
Right, and make it a flavored water.
Make it a flavored water.
Right, or just add a few lemons or do fruit infused water. Obviously, don't eat the fruit.
You can do fruit infused water, but one of the easy ways to do it is if I don't want to do we've done fruit infusions. I like strawberry and basil for a fruit infusion. I think it's really good. Yeah. It's one of my favorites.
Delicious.
Or you can do cucumbers and limes, or I actually did a cucumber and jalapeno water one time, and it was spicy water, and maybe it was jalapenos and limes. I can't remember which one it was. And then I thought it was amazing. It was spicy water, didn't break my fast, and then I used it to, when my fast was done, I had all this spicy water, and I used it to make my quinoa. So
there's a lot of options out there for what you can do as a fasting fuel. We also like cocoa brew.
Yeah, cocoa brew. Yeah, that's
brews like tea or coffee, but it's chocolate.
Chocolate beans. It's all fat. Again, tools to help you keep fasting.
Right, and as a beginning faster, those are so helpful when you're really trying to learn how to fast, help your body switch into ketosis. They can be a really useful tool. But again, it's sort of a prayerful decision. If God calls you to a cleaner fast, not using fasting fuels, then do that, because He's going to give you the strength and the power to do that. But it's just really about being thoughtful and listening to your body. And, if you are really struggling with fasting, the fasting fuels aren't helping, then just break your fast. It's not the end of the world, and God isn't expecting perfection from us. He knows that we're human. And so sometimes we just have to remember that and not be too hard on ourselves when we are trying to fast, especially as a beginner. So give yourself some grace, and if you need a fasting fuel, use it. And if you don't, then don't. Not everything is a fasting fuel. And if you're uncertain, ask us in the comments. We would love to answer. Thanks for joining us in this episode of the Kingdom Fasting Podcast, where we talked about fasting fuels. I hope this was helpful for you. And if it was, share it with someone that you want to fast with.
We would love to share the truth and the scientific evidence of fasting and fasting fuels, not only with you, but with your friends and family.